Hello everyone, my name is Eric Ross, and in this video we're going to talk about PHP sticky forms, what they are and how do we create one. You'll notice that this video is part 1. I've split this series into 2 videos, so you don't have one super long video to watch, because we do have quite a bit of material to cover here. So let's get started by looking at what our completed form is going to look like. Actually, to understand what the completed one is going to entail, I'm going to take a look at the one we did earlier this week for the dynamic confirmation page. So if you remember that form, when you filled it out, you I'm just going to fill it out real quick. When you filled it out, there's actually 2 pages. One was the main form, form.php, or you might have an HTML page depending on how you did it. And then when you submit the form, it goes to another page, a second page. In my case, it's called handleform.php. So if we look at the URL bar, when I hit submit, you'll see it goes to handleform.php, and on that page is where we handled the form submission. Well, a sticky form eliminates the second page. It contains one PHP page that has both the form and the handle form, the confirmation page in one. So if I take a look at it, here's my registration form, and when I fill it out, you'll see that it stays on the same page. So I was on form complete.php page. When I hit submit, I'm still on form complete. The results are very similar. You'll see that the form is not being displayed at all, and instead I'm just showing the confirmation message. I do have validation on the form, so if I leave some fields blank, you'll see that I'm getting errors about those fields that are blank still. Now this validation is different from our previous validation. Previously we were using JavaScript validation, which is a client-side validation, meaning it runs only through your browser. On here I've eliminated the JavaScript validation and I replaced it with PHP validation. The benefit to using PHP validation is that it doesn't rely on JavaScript. So if I go back and look at my form from earlier this week, and if I go in and disable JavaScript in my browser, which anyone can do, in Firefox it's Tools, Options, and then the Content tab, if you uncheck this Enable JavaScript box, and you hit OK, and I need to refresh the page for it to show, but you'll see that I now have no client-side validation at all. So if I just hit submit, no validation, it goes right to handleform.php, and all my fields are empty. So this is something I want to prevent. If I go back in here and enable JavaScript, I refresh the page just to show you that there's our JavaScript validation. So instead, on this new form, I'm using PHP to make sure that the user actually did enter something even when JavaScript is disabled. So those are the 2 big things we'll be doing, is making our form sticky, so we're going to have just one PHP page, and then we're also going to add some PHP validation. And just to give you an idea, in this video, in part 1, I'm going to make my form a little easier. I eliminated all the drop-down lists and a few of the extra questions, so I just have these 4, I guess 5 fields. When I hit submit and they're blank, I get the error messages. If I fill them all in, I'll get taken to the completion, and you'll see it's still form.php. Another thing I want to point out on this form is, let's say I fill out some of the fields but not all of them. So let's say I just leave the name field and I hit submit. You'll see that my name stays as whatever I inputted. It doesn't disappear. So that's another some more PHP code that we'll use to do that. So if I fill in these three but leave these two blank, it remembers them. And I know this doesn't seem like a big deal because when we're doing JavaScript validation, the page never refreshes and never submits itself. But when you eliminate JavaScript validation and we use PHP validation, everything happens server side. So normally when you would submit a form like this, if you don't do any special coding, every time you submit it, you would lose all these values in your text boxes. So we're using some PHP code to prevent that from happening. So let's take a look at getting started here. So I've created a new page for this assignment, and I basically took the last assignment, copied and pasted it. I made a few adjustments. I've eliminated some extra fields to make the video a little shorter. I have taken out all JavaScript or Spry, or in my case jQuery client-side validation. So if you watch the jQuery validation video from last week, I had something going on in here. I commented it out. I've also eliminated the class equals required from these text boxes. So if you have validation on your form, JavaScript validation, if you have JavaScript validation or Spry validation, you want to remove it for this assignment to begin with, so you can test your form out. So like I said, I eliminated most of the fields. I just have these 5: name, email, username, password, and confirm password. So I've also added a little PHP code block. This is where I'm going to do most of my PHP coding at, right here. And the reason I'm doing it here is because this is where I want my PHP error messages to show. I want them to be right above the form. So the first thing we want to do is handle the form submission. So when a PHP form, when the user hits submit, I need to do something. Well, there's several ways you can check to see if the page has been submitted. The way we're going to use is using the isSet command. And I'm going to check to see if the submit button is set, if it has a value. And one thing to keep in mind is that this value is actually coming from the name of the submit button. So in my case, my submit button has a name of submit, and it's a lowercase. This is important. You don't want to use the value, you want to use the actual name. So if this name was something else, let's say it was test, then up here I would need to use test. Oops. But it's not, it's submit, so I'm going to leave it as submit. I'm going to go back down here and make that to submit. So I now have a check that says if the page has been submitted, I want to run some code now. So another thing I'm going to do is up here is I'm going to create a new variable called problem, and I want to set it to be false initially. So I'm going to use this value to see if there's any sort of problem with the form submission, and if there is, I want to flag the form as having a problem so I can do something later on, which I'll explain a little more. So what do I want to do next? I want to check to make sure that the user has provided values for all my fields. So I want to check to make sure that the name field has a value. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add another if statement. I'm going to use the empty function, and I'm going to check to make sure that the name field has a value. So this is saying if the text box that's called name, so this name matches this name, if the text box called name is empty, then there's a problem. The user didn't fill it out. So I'm going to use that flag that says problem equals true. So I know there's a problem now. I also want to print out to the screen an error message. So I'm going to show you one way of doing that, and then I'm going to refine it a little bit, make it a little more user-friendly. So here I'm going to put print please enter your name. So if the user doesn't enter their name, they should see this message pop up on the screen. So I'm just going to test my form now. So I'm going to go back to it, I'm going to refresh it to make sure I have a fresh version of it. I'm going to leave the name field blank, I'm going to hit submit. Oh, yes, I forgot a very important step with a sticky form. I haven't changed my form action to submit to form.php. It's still trying to submit to handle form.php, and that file does not exist in this directory yet. So I need to go back in here, and in my form action, I need to make it equal to whatever my page name is. In this example, it's form.php. So I need to put form.php here. So now when the user hits submit, it's going to submit to the page instead of to the handle page. So I'm going to go back, I'm going to refresh the page. I'm going to leave the name blank, I'm going to hit submit. And now I'm getting a nice message that says, please enter your name. I'm going to make this I'm going to print out this name a little differently. What I want to do is I'm going to create a new variable called errors. And initially it's going to be set to the following: errors were found with your submission, with a closing paragraph tag. And instead of printing out please enter your name, I'm going to add to that error message whatever my error is. So please enter your name. So you'll see I use this period equal sign, dot equal sign, and this is an operator in PHP, and this operator is going to take this string and add it to the end of whatever the variable is already equal to. So in this case, it's just going to take this and add it to the end of this line. That's what the dot equal sign is doing. I also want to style this a little bit. I'm going to set it to a label tag with a class of error. And this is something that I already set up in the previous assignment. So if I scroll up here, I have a label defined and I have a style defined for it. So now I have the variable errors, and you can see I'm not printing out an error anywhere yet. So that's something I'm going to do down here. I'm going to put another if statement, and here's where that problem variable comes into play. So so let me just set up this statement. Okay. So what have I done here? Once I've done all my checks, I'm going to add more here in a second, but once I've done all my checks, I'm running another if statement that says if, and this exclamation mark means if there is not a problem. So if problem is equal to so this is basically saying if problem is not equal to false. Do the following. So this part of the if statement will only run when there isn't an error. This part of the if statement, the else, will run if there has been a problem. So if problem is equal to true. Then I'm going to actually print out what this error message is. If there isn't an error, this is where we're going to print our thank you message, and we'll do that in a second. But I want to show you this real quick. So if I upload my page, I'm going to leave the name blank. So here's that error message now. So the first line is the following errors are found in your submission, and then here's where I'm printing out that error at. So you can see if the name is blank, I'm setting that problem variable to be true. So I'm telling my page, oh, there's a problem with the submission. Then I'm also adding to the error message this error, please enter your name. And then down here I'm doing a check of this problem variable. If it's equal to true, then I want to print out this error message. So let's create a few more errors here to show you how this is working. So I'm also want to check that the email address isn't blank. And I want to check that the username isn't blank. And I want to make sure that both passwords are set. So confirm password. So now when I upload this, so hopefully I didn't do that too fast. Basically I just copied this same empty statement, pasted it for every field on my form. So now it's going to check to make sure that each field has been filled out. So if I leave this form blank again, now I'm getting all those error messages. Now, if the form has been completely filled out, we haven't done this yet. Nothing's happening, and you'll see that the error messages aren't being printed, which is good. So what do we need to do now is hide this form and show our confirmation message instead. So let's start out by showing the confirmation message. I'm going to do that right within this if statement. So if there isn't a problem, I'm going to print out that message. So I'm just using a paragraph tag, or I'm using the print statement, and just creating a regular HTML paragraph tag. And the rest of this I'm going to copy and paste because I'm lazy like that. So I'm going to print out thank you, and I'm going to print out name with a colon and then a space, and then I'm printing back the name to them. These brackets are around this variable so that I can include it within a print statement without having to break up the print statement. So you want to surround your post variable names with these brackets when you're printing them out. So I'm just printing back the name, email, and username to the user. So now if I upload that, we're almost done. So I'm going to refresh the page. Oops. So there's our message, but we want to get rid of this ugly form now. Or not ugly, but this form is just not needed on the confirmation page. So I'm going to add one more if statement, and I'm going to put it right above our form. and this is in the wrong place. This needs to go, this was just a comment I made. This is where I want my form errors to show. This is just an HTML comment that I made, so I'm going to put it back up here because that's where my errors are showing. Now, like I said, we want to hide the form from showing if, well, there's two cases where we want the form to show. The first is when the page is first loaded, before the user has hit the submit button. We want the form to show. We also want the form to show if there's been some sort of problem on the form. So if the user forgot to fill out a field, we want that form to stay on the page. So we're going to add another if statement, and this one's going to be a little different. We're actually going to do two checks. So I'm going to comment this so I know exactly what it does. So this is saying if the page has not been submitted, or the or sign in PHP is these double brackets, or there is a problem with the form, keep it showing. So if the page has not been submitted or there is a problem with the form, you see I got my open bracket here, so I'm going to show the form. So I need to go down here past the form, and I need to end this if statement. So I started the if statement up here, and then I'm ending it down here. So what this is going to do is if the form has been completely filled out and there's no problems with it, this form isn't going to show at all now. The only time it's going to show is if the page hasn't been submitted, so the page is first loaded, or there's a problem with the form. So I'm going to refresh the page. So let's just show it when it's completely filled out. So there it is. We've registered and the form is now disappearing. Now there's two more things we want to do that I want to show you. The first is I want to add a check to make sure that these two password fields are the same. Right now, if you enter different values, there's no check to make sure that they're equal to each other. So we can do that by just adding another if statement to our validation up here. So I'm just going to copy and paste this because I've already written it. So this is another if statement. We're saying if the password field is not equal to, this exclamation point equal means not equal to. So if the password is not equal to the confirmed password, flag that there's a problem, and then display that error message to the user. So I'm going to save this and then upload it. And now if I refresh this form, or I submit it, the password does not match your confirmed password. So there's also another problem here, which I hope is apparent now. If there's a problem with the form and the user's filled out some of it, and you hit submit, all the form elements disappear. So if I just fill in the name, for example, and I hit submit, I would expect it to keep the name value there, but it doesn't. They all disappear, including the name, the one that I entered. So let's say I fill out these three, but leave the two passwords blank. All the form fields are gone. So that's a problem we want to fix. And again, we're going to use the if statement for this one as well. To keep the value of the text box, there's actually a text box property called value. And whatever you put in here is what is going to show up in the form by default. So let's say I put value equals test, and I uploaded it. when my form is refreshed, you'll see that now the name field has that value that I inputted into it. Well, we can use this value to add a PHP statement that checks to see if the name value, if the page has been submitted, and if it has the user entered anything into the name field. So if they've submitted the form and there's a value for the name field, then we want to print it out here. So I'm going to use an if statement again. If is set post name, then I want to print, and we're going to use this function. So this function is a built-in PHP function, and basically what it does is it takes, if the user happens to enter any special characters into the text field, it'll convert them to something that PHP can read. It's not absolutely required. You could just leave it out and it would probably be okay 90% of the time, but we do want to catch those special characters that a user enters. So you can see this is just another if statement. It's checking to see if the name value, the post name value exists. So again, these names are correlated. This text box name is related to this post name. So if this value is set, we're going to print it as the value of the text box. So in order to save some lines of code, I'm just going to combine this into a single line, which you can do just by deleting the white space. So if I upload this, so now I would expect when I input my name, whatever I input in here is going to stay in here when I hit the submit button, which it does. So now I'm going to do the same thing for the other fields. I'm just going to copy this entire thing, value, so I'm going to do the same for email. And I'm just going to go in here and change wherever it says name to email. And same for username. And for the two password fields. I'm going to use this Dreamweaver function to make my screen a little bigger here. So confirm password is my last one. So if I upload this, hit submit, or let's say I fill out some of the fields. I leave the passwords blank. I should see that all three of these stay the same. My passwords go away. Now if I want to test the passwords, then I'll do the same thing. I'm going to leave these ones blank. Good. So now, I'm still going to get an error because my passwords don't match. But now, if I enter everything correctly, I get my confirmation page. And one last change I'm going to make, I notice that these are still text fields. I'm going to make these password fields so that the password actually doesn't show up. And you do that by just going in here and instead of an input type of text, just an input type of password. So I think that should do it. I'm going to do one final test. Again, if you don't enter anything, you get your error messages. If you enter something, but you don't enter everything correctly, these fields will be remembered. And those fields will be blank. And now my password field is they're password boxes instead of text boxes. And when everything is correct, you get the confirmation message, and then your form disappears. So that's the end of part 1 of this video. In part 2, in the next video, I'm going to show how you would deal with drop-down lists and then a checkbox on a sticky form. It's a little more difficult. There's a little more code you have to do to get these text boxes to remember what values were entered. But we'll go over that, and then I'll also go over combining the PHP validation with the JavaScript validation. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. You get the client-side validation, and you also get the PHP server-side validation. All right, thanks a lot.